Welcome to another episode of the Gritty Hour. I'm here with the Pontificators. You've seen them before.
Hey there.
We're delighted to be here. We're delighted to be here, Thomas.
Left to right, we have Henry Boehringer.
Right.
Great to see you again, Henry.
Hello.
In the center, we have Dr. Phil Kosofsky.
Don't call me doctor.
Okay,
I'm
Phil.
Phil.
Dr. Phil.
No, not that guy.
And on the right, we have Barry Cord.
Hello.
Welcome back to the Gritty Hour, Barry.
Delighted to be here.
No, you look delighted too.
I'm just thrilled out of my mind.
So what's going on in the world? Anything?
It's a shit show.
It's a shit show, is right. We have
I second that motion.
Since we had the Pontificators episode 2, we've had a lot of things going on in the world. Namely, what's going on in Israel as we're recording, and the Gaza and Palestine. What do you guys think about it, Doc?
I'm trying to figure out what their tactics and strategy is, because just killing 1,200 people isn't going to do a lot of good for their cause. They have to have some reason and some support and some longer term strategy. And I can't understand what that would be or how this would fit in it. They're not making a lot of friends doing this. Not even their closer friends. Maybe Iran, maybe some people, maybe Hezbollah, but that's not a lot of support.
Yeah. What do you think, Henry?
I'll take a pass at the moment.
Okay. Barry?
I think it's a blind for something else, and I think it's part of something, and they're being played, and they don't know they're being played. And I think it's a very large picture. I think it's a chess game, and who plays the best chess games in the world?
CIA?
Russia.
Hmm.
I think it's coming out of there.
Did knock the Ukraine off the headlines.
Knocked the Ukraine off the headlines, up oil prices, and who needs the oil prices higher? One country in the world, and who is the cartel? I think it has a lot to do with the global move. I think that.
Well, since you opened that can of worms, I was going to ask the three of you what you thought about Mossad not even hearing about this. Do you believe that?
No.
Well, between the Mossad and the CIA, they didn't have one inkling. We heard 2 weeks before Russia was going to invade Ukraine, that Russia was going to invade Ukraine.
This is clearly an orchestrated move that is outside the parameters of just the Israeli situation. And because it's so complicated and it's so multifaceted.
Gotta speak up, Barry.
Because it's so complicated and so multifaceted, it has to be designed by somebody who understands these type of strategies. Generally speaking, that are not splinter groups like groups of terrorists, normally act independent of even their own groups. So that if one of them is caught, they don't know what the other one's doing. This is a major operation by some people who know how to plan very well. And the fact that so many international agencies named, and I would name the Brits, the French, the Americans to start with, are not aware or were not aware of this, much less the Israelis, I find that just a little hard to swallow.
A little willful blindness going on.
I would think so.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I go back to oil, I go back to money, I go back to a lot of things on this. Time will tell. I'm not sure. We'll hear everything because usually there's subterfuge involved. But oil had been starting to go down. I'm sure this was in the works for a long time because you can't plan this operation overnight. Too many hands in it. Too many beach fronts, too many everything. This is. I'm not a conspiracy guy, but this is really.
The Egyptians said that they spoke to the Israelis and said something was going to happen. Of course, who do you believe?
Yeah.
Who's telling the truth at what time?
Do you think Netanyahu's current position plays into it?
I can't speak to that. I mean, he was not popular. I mean, his popularity resides among a faction of the people, which is the ultra-right. He is not liked by a lot of Israelis that I know, certainly not liked by a lot of Palestinians that I know. I have friends on both sides of that wall, and he is not a favored son. However, he's in the position of control, and the population of any country is not often the smartest population that carries the vote, or often it's the businesses that carry the vote, by undermining legal processes, by being able to dump all the money in the world into whatever their direction is wanted to be.
Yeah.
But I don't have an opinion.
I kind of agree with Barry. I've been thinking about this also. that it's just the timing with Ukraine going on, everything just happening, China running around, doing whatever they're doing in the South China Seas. I mean, the whole thing just feels like, it's like someone's looking to create another distraction, another problem for the Western world to deal with.
It reminds me of the Axis in World War II.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it kind of brings to me to be.
What do you guys think of Americans, whatever political spectrum they're on, saying free Palestine as all this is going on?
I have an answer for that if you want. I think it's the rights of this country to say what you want, whether I agree with you or not. You can say what you want. That's one of the benefits of having a democratic country. I don't have to agree with you. I can get pretty hot under the collar if I don't agree with you. But with the way things are going on in this country, free speech is very important that it's maintained. I worry about it being curtailed in many cases. This is a horrific situation. Who kills babies and steals grandmothers and shoots people in the head that are innocent civilians? Pretty obvious about that. You go to the most radical group, get them on fire. They've got them on fire. So world headlines, you turn your face from a lot of things, including trials that are going on in this country, including unpopular dictators around the world. It's a very, very interesting international play. This is a chess game. This is just one drop in it. And the Israelis, the relatively decent-sized population of Jewish people, the whole world population of Jewish people is under 15 million against a world population of 7.5 billion people. What happens if they get rid of Jewish people? Who is the next one that's going to be in the stew pot? This whole thing is very sick.
Yes, it seems like history does repeat itself sometimes. But let's hope this is the Reader's Digest version.
Netanyahu claimed that he was the only person who could keep Israel safe. That doesn't seem to be true.
Sounds a little like Donald Trump.
Well, I was going to ask you, men, what you thought of, like, how far can Israel go in their destruction that they're bound to mete out. They've already started meting out. Retribution, call it if you want to, but how far do you think they can go before they lose the goodwill of the world opinion?
I don't think they care.
I think it's very unfortunate. I am sorry for all the innocent people on all sides. They're always the ones that suffer. War is hell as we know it, and there have been a lot more eloquent people saying a lot of statements about that over the centuries. It is a nightmare, and the innocent people that suffer is, again, a horrible show. But if they were to take out these guys one at a time, 10 at a time, 100 at a time, fine. And I'm not talking about the Palestinian population. I'm talking about the terrorists. It's just terrible. There'll be collateral damage of massive, massive scale.
Usually the damage to innocent people and non-combatants is much higher than it is to armed people in every war. And whether it's direct warfare or starvation, whatever, they die more.
The thing that could have, before I came over here, I was watching an interview, and somebody was interviewing this senior Israeli officer. He'd been a lifer, and he'd been in the armed forces for 39 years. And somebody asked him that, and said, well, how do you feel about this whole thing? How has it changed you? And he said that prior to this, he had what shall we call it, more of an open mind, or not as, he didn't have any vengeful feelings or a lot of ill will. But he said after witnessing what he saw, all he wants to do is get back on the line and do what he has to do. So, I mean, revenge is it's a funny thing, you know. I mean, when you think about revenge, you know, like I've thought about revenge lots of times, but on people who screwed me. And revenge actually releases endorphins, thinking about it. And doing it releases more endorphins. So what you have here is, you know, men on each side, the Palestinians who came in, you know, with some sort of, you know, a lot of hatred and who are feeding off of each other as far as killing people, because I think that's what happens. You get in a situation, you get into a firefight or whatever, and you just ignore the rules and you just kill people, whoever's out in front of you. And I think that, you know, they fed off of each other and it created an ugly situation. And I think that the revenge that the Israelis have right now, and it's across the board. It's not just, you know, the military here. It's, you know, Hamas felt the revenge before, not the people sitting in their living room in Gaza. It was a Hamas thing. But now they've awoken the revenge of a whole country. I mean, I don't think there's anyone in Israel right now who wants to do anything for the West Bank.
Yeah.
And I think that it's going to play out very badly. And whether, you know, what the world will do, you know, I don't think Israel really cares about what the world thinks, because, you know, they have a history that which allows them to stand up for their own safety and their own well-being.
The Israelis have a few guiding principles, and one is never again, no matter what the cost to anybody. We're not going to be that kind of victim again. So we don't care what you think at a certain point. It's not going to happen to us.
Yeah. Well, I think the vengeance factor, we can all relate to it, having lived through 9/11, what that feels like. But there has been reports that there's a large element of Hamas and Hamas allies in this country, in the United States. What do you guys think about that?
I think there is a lot of hidden people from all over the world with agendas in this country. I mean, sleepers are no new surprise. I mean, even films back in the 60s, you know, Manchurian Candidate, things like that.
The German spy.
The German spies. I mean, our country is rife with that. Every country is rife with it. We have spies all over the world. We're not, you know, clean in that. We're not innocent in that. I think it is the duty of countries to have spies in areas. They have to, but the spies better be pretty good in behalf of the U.S. I mean, we are still the most powerful country in the world. We're the wealthiest country in the world. And we are holding up the world in terms of morality as much as we do.
Yeah.
As much as we make mistakes, it's hard to be the global policeman.
Yeah.
And I think that we can expect spies. And as far as having Hamas sympathizers or agents over here, it'd be wonderful to find all of those guys or women.
Well, excuse me, Barry, I was notified by Henry that his caviar appetizer is ready. So we're gonna take a short break while he goes to get his order. The money trail, you know. So,
You know, as far as, it's all about hatred, like I said before, and revenge. Okay. I mean, there was an incident recently in the last couple of months where some fellow was, I guess, more an Orthodox or Hasidic Jew, was going to some sort of a rally, and he was walking down the street in New York, and a couple of Palestinians just pounded him. And naturally, you know, the good Attorney General, Mr. Bragg, VA Bragg, kind of let them off very lightly, and it just indicates that, you know, it just follows. And so, to the degree that, you know, there's this a massive amount of ill feelings there, it's just exported here. And then you have, you know, I guess what you would call the woke generation, or whatever, the woke people, and they're They're saying, that this is, that they had a right to attack Israel. I think there was something that I saw about the president of the NYU Law School Student Association.
Harvard.
No, it's NYU.
It was Harvard was
Okay.
also involved.
Yeah, came out with some sort of absolutely
Ridiculous.
ridiculous stuff. I mean, there's a, there's a, somehow, this total dissatisfaction or distrust or hatred or whatever has filtered into a part of our political spectrum on both sides. And this one here is particularly illuminating the ill will that's on the left. So I just don't.
Well, do any of the three is find at least disconcerting, the amount of rallies for Palestine that have occurred in many cities around the United States in the last few days?
When you say disconcerting, you mean upsetting?
Upsetting.
Well, one has to expect that. It's the counter reaction. There's give and take on all sides, and there's a desire to express their frustration. I think the problem, I shouldn't say that I think, the problem with this action that has been meted out on the Israelis by the Hamas group, and they're saying it's the Hamas group, but it's a broader coalition of people. There's no question about that. I think is unmitigated brutality and sickness, driven by probably a smaller amount of the population, a very tiny, small part of the population of Palestine. They're really just the worst group. There are problems. There are no questions about that. There have been problems for years. The problems could have been solved by an enlightened leadership on both sides. Hasn't been. And there's pent up anger, but that's not what this is about. This is about an attack on innocent, unsuspecting people, primarily teens, people in their 20s, farmers, people that are family people. It's not a military action. It is a disgusting, violent, heinous action by bloodthirsty assholes, period. And my feeling is this will set them back. This will unleash terrible reprisals. This goes right back to the Bible of, and whosever Bible it is, eye for an eye, right at its base root, which is just horrendous. Nobody needs this. Nobody wants this. But as Henry pointed out, the endorphins will fly and make people feel good in a bloodlust. But I think it's awful. And there are things that have to be addressed. So people having demonstrations are people with their own opinions. And unfortunately, whether you don't, I go back to earlier, whether you like it or not, you have to tolerate it and you have to listen to it. They need to get their endorphins up by screaming and yelling in the street. We have people burning American flags that are Americans in this country all the time. So it's not restricted just to them. But people need to remember that this is an atrocity. This is not a true political statement. And what's behind this? That is something that we'll find out. And in the middle of it, there's going to be a hell of a lot of carnage and a hell of a lot of economic pain. And where are they going to put the people that want to leave Palestine? They can't even get out of there. The exodus out of the Middle East, out of Afghanistan, out of every country in the world it's gone global. I speak to friends of mine around the world that are from Germany, or they're from Egypt, or they're from the Middle East, or they're from China. Everybody wants to move. Everybody wants to go someplace else, but people are getting frustrated because everything is really upset and everything is upside down. The normal peace that we had 8 years ago, or relative peace, depending on what country you're in, has been rocked. We know it's been rocked one reason, because we let our flag down and said, okay, let's play with, the political bad guys. Let's go there, and I love you kind of Putin kind of people. Wrong, mistake, horrific, terrible. It's opened up the door to this kind of thuggery. I'll rest my thoughts for a moment.
Oh, it was very eloquent.
I don't know about that.
Since you brought him up, what do you think of the current situation in Ukraine?
I think the current situation in the Ukraine, I think we We have to wake the Republican Party up and say, you need to give them arms. We don't need a replay of World War II. This will be the first of many countries taken over by a person that has no responsibility other than to himself, wants his self-aggrandizement, which is Putin. And I think that this is a shit show, to use Henry's words. And I think we need to support our allies. I think that our European and Western allies are doing a good job, but they have their own concerns. They need to stockpile their own armaments, because you never know. If the Ukraine falls, this is not going to stop that person. He doesn't care. He wants a legacy of a greater Russia again. He's not real. He's already the largest country in the world. How much, and what do they need over there? They're more, minerals in that section of the world than any place else. But they never developed anything that they did except selling their assets that are in the ground. Whether it's minerals, whether it's oil, whatever it is, where's the technology that they could have developed? Because they're not stupid people and they have a good school system. It's their ideology that has held them back. And it's the thought that they need an iron ruler to govern them that's held them back. That's absurd. It needs to be a democratic country, or at least some democratic principles, in order to expand, and not expand by taking over other countries. It's just.
The Ukrainians are not fighting for themselves alone. They're fighting for us and for Europe.
True.
We
Well,
should
Phil,
support them.
Phil, what do you think the end game is, though?
I
Gonna
think
fight forever?
If we support the Ukrainians, Putin will lose.
Do you think Russia's fighting with one hand tied behind their back?
Russia is fighting at an increasing disadvantage. Whatever it is, the Ukrainians are winning slowly. They're developing their own technologies. They're figuring out different ways to fight the Russians. And they started this advance, right, with American tactics. It didn't work. So now they're using their own tactics. It's working. It's slowly, but it's working. And if you read the reports, the Russians are losing men and material at an enormous rate.
But so
And
are
they're
the
using,
Ukrainians.
they're losing trained men. They can't just put people into that battlefield after 6 weeks of training.
Well,
Not at
the
all.
Ukrainians are losing enormous amount of people and material too, most of it from the West. And my point is, what is the end game? Is anybody going to ever talk about a peaceable solution to
So
this?
Zelensky has said the end game is when the Russians are no longer on Ukrainian territory. I think he means it. He doesn't.
But he's also included Crimea in that, and I can't see that being a viable end game for him.
I see it as a viable end game.
I do too. I think
Yeah.
I think that has to be recaptured.
Right.
Henry, what do you think?
I think, I'm not Ukrainian, so, I don't know how Ukrainians feel, but just sitting on the outside here, looking at it, I think, if they could get back to the status quo and letting Russia hold on to the Crimea, I think that's just, that would be a good fallback for Ukraine. I think that Russia has a long history with the Crimea, and
Longer than Ukraine?
yes, and so it may be more of a emotional or a harder thing for Russia to give up on than it should be the Ukraine. So just going back to the Israeli thing, what happens with this Gaza thing? It's just that the revenge that the Israelis are going to or are taking on the Gaza, and they deserve to take it. But the only outcome really is more recruitment. It's going to recruit more haters, and so it's just if you're a teenager who's 18 years old or 20 years old and you weren't thinking about it, now you are thinking about it. After seeing your home bombed out and whatever else, it's just a big recruitment game. And I think maybe part of it is that they see this and they're willing to put up the sacrifice to increase the recruitment and the hatred around the world and within all of the Arab world. Part of
That was scary.
I think we're being bugged. Part of this, part of what was going on is that Israel was at that point in time negotiating some sort of an agreement with the Saudis, got some sort of a normalization type of situation. And I don't think that people like that. I don't think Iran liked it. I don't think Russia liked it. And so I would not be surprised at going back to what Barry said, is that they wanted to be purposeful about stopping this. And that was part of this, is to maintain the solidarity within the Arab bloc, which would include the Saudis, the Iranians, the Iraq, all of the folks, So that's just, I apologize for just backing there, but I was just.
No, that's fine. It brings the question, that made me think of the question, do you think the United States is retreating somewhat from the world stage in its diplomatic end? Like, for example, we basically left Syria to the Russians and the Turks. And, when I was a kid, Damascus was like a world-class city, and I don't know what's left there, but it seems like we just turned our backs on Syria and left it to the Russians and the Turks.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, are we imploding? Are we retreating from the diplomatic side of world events?
Well, I think that the last administration held back from appointing ambassadors, that's to start with. This administration is fighting with the Republican Party to even get generals into the military, to get the agreement of Congress from Republican senators to fight on behalf of America, to keep our defenses up. They have stopped left and right appointments all over the country for important positions, which filter right back, of course, to our embassies abroad. And I think that pulling back is a terrible mistake. Again, I go back to the policemen of the world. We don't like being the police person of the world, police country of the world, but we are. And so we accepted that responsibility. And unfortunately, there's a price to be paid for that. And it's all over the lot what that price is, from dollars to soldiers to billions, if not trillions, in expenditures to keep our country safe and to keep the Western world safe against aggressive parties. And are we pulling back? Yes, there are factions that are saying pull back. They don't want this expense. And that, that's the same kind of thing that led to World War I and led to World War II. So, we have to be peace. We can't get involved in that. Oh, that dictator over there, let him take that land. Oh, the Sudetenland, that's theirs. They need that. Or, oh, Poland, well, we don't care about Poland. Oh, that's all coming around. So we have to pay attention to
Well, what do you think of that element in Congress, going back to what's going on in Israel? I forget what they call these, AOC, and refusing to denounce Hamas.
The mods.
What do you feel about that?
I think that will pay in the polls.
What was the name of that group again?
That's the far left.
Posse.
No, they call themselves something.
Who knows? But it's the far
It was
left.
the lady from
we know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be payback at the polls. That's what I think, and there'll certainly be payback in awarding their.
Well, her district is
Yeah.
predominantly Islamic religion.
There'll be payback. There's still going to be payback.
Mhm.
So if she's not.
Not AOC, I meant the lady in Minnesota whose name I can't think of.
I know what you're talking about. The one that's always in trouble for spouting off ridiculous positions.
Ilhan Omar.
That's the word, yep.
Yes.
No, that'll be very.
Well, what do you feel about that, Phil, that the fact that they didn't want to denounce what's going on in Israel?
Well, what I think, unfortunately, is that every successful revolutionary movement has a wing that is violent and terrorist.
Totally.
And our revolution in the United States was not supported by everybody. Lots of people went to England. I think that is highest number of troops in Washington had 30,000. Right. I don't know who they were. A lot of them were upper class Virginians interested in property rights and taxes. But there were a lot of them, say, up in Lexington and Concord, and you could say those people are terrorists. They're busy shooting redcoats, right, who were just enlisted men from England, and they're getting shot. And You know, Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne lost 3,000 men upstate, right? Same thing, right? He irregulars blasted them. And look at the Israelis. They may have said, oh, we were fighting the British and we were being sort of up and up on it. But then they had the Irgun, which would blow up the British.
Right.
Right. And everybody says, oh, those guys are bad. But quietly in bed, every revolution is grateful to having one mad arm because they're effective. And so is Hamas effective to achieve any of the aims that the Palestinians might want? And they deserve a state. They're a people. They have a culture. So they deserve to have some place in which they can be comfortable.
The point I'm asking you, though, is what about the failure of these congresswomen to denounce what they did in the last few days,
It's hard
including
to know.
cutting off the heads of infants?
It's hard to know.
And they refused to denounce that.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your opinion on that specifically is.
Basically, that's awful. She could denounce them and then in the second sentence talk about the rights of the Palestinians as a nation. So
I agree with you.
there was a way she could have done that.
I think
And
I think most Americans would have found that much more appropriate than just refusing to denounce it completely.
Right.
You have to have a position,
Mhm.
or you shouldn't have an office.
You just said something before about whether we should be pulling back from the world stage.
I asked you if you think we are.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it makes me think though of the local family here that lost a daughter to a suicide bomber several years ago.
Where?
In Syria or something over, and she was having lunch with two friends. You think about, when I think about the sacrifice that family made, I think that they're the only one who are really qualified to say, in my mind, is America doing the right thing? And, doing the right thing in Israel, doing the right thing in the Ukraine, always puts us somehow at risk. And with doing what we think is the right thing, there's always some element of sacrifice. And it's just unfortunate that, that the people who really are so far removed from making the policy are the ones who end up feeling the sacrifice. It's.
If you look at our Congress, it's largely older men whose children are disproportionately not veterans.
Right.
Right. And they themselves are not veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel a lot of the problem is our government.
Do you have an opinion
And
about term limits?
Greatly in favor of term limits for everybody. Right. Senators, presidents, Supreme Court justices.
Right.
Right. Nobody should be in there forever. And look at Senator Feinstein, who at the very end, right, was disabled and demented. And look at Reagan. He was demented.
Unfortunately, Dianne Feinstein had a lot of company in her circle.
That's right.
But, I sort of agree with you, the argument that it does take away they can get voted out. So it does take away that choice. But I think elections are so corrupt in this country that term limits is probably the only sensible solution. So I agree with you.
Well, I don't think elections are corrupt. I think it's just that if you stay in there too long, that you're more easily bought.
But it does favor the incumbents.
I mean,
I think
because once you're in, you're supported by all of these, the pharmaceutical companies.
That's
corruption.
That's corruption.
You have this, because you have some one vote, you're able to garner all these bucks from people who are looking to just take care of themselves.
The system does favor the incumbent.
Absolutely.
To Phil's point, I think term limits would eradicate that.
I don't think that we should have term limits for the Supreme Court. Right? Even though things have gotten pretty ugly with the Supreme Court, You know, I've always felt that the law should be above any kind of politics.
Not
And-
right now.
there's
Well, I feel that the law should be above any kind of politics, and it has historically kind of been that way, and it's only recently kind of gotten the other way.
no,
And things coming out about Clarence Thomas hanging out with Trammell Crow and all of this. I mean, it's not good. It's not good at all. But and it's wrong. But
Do you have a remedy to that in mind then, if you don't want to have?
I think that the court should take when something like that happens, I think that there should be some sort of, the leadership of the court should take over. It shouldn't be the president taking over or whatever. It should be, the court should solve those problems itself. And
The Chief Justice, or how would?
Yeah,
I'm just curious how that would happen.
the Chief Justice, whatever, I
Mhm.
mean, should just call a hearing and say, if I was, I just say, all right, guys, defend yourself to the rest of us, and we'll figure out if what you did is right or wrong.
that's
Okay, and-
exactly what the court didn't do.
But
Right,
I'm saying, but that's what,
Roberts. So
Right.
if they don't do it, then Congress should do it for the people. Nobody is above the law, including the justices. And the power of the Supreme Court started when, Justice Marshall said they had the power to declare things unconstitutional. Maybe we shouldn't have the Supreme Court that can do that. If Congress passes something completely stupid, then we get rid of the congressman who passed it. There's no reason to have a Supreme Court that can declare things unconstitutional, because that licensed Congress to do idiotic things.
what Thomas did was a big, stupid mistake. That he knew, that he should have been aware enough that I'm making a mistake here. That I shouldn't be taking, plane rides in this corporate jet or whatever. He should just, he should have known that. And he didn't, or he knew it, but he chose to ignore it. But I don't think that, I don't think that's reason to, I don't think that's one person's stupidity is not a reason to overturn the
On the
Constitution
other
of the
hand,
United
we
States.
have a Congress that's indemnified itself from almost every action there is.
Right.
They trade stocks on insider information.
Right.
If you mention to the local newsstand guy that, gee, I think, XYZ is going to go up, well, they can throw you in jail because you passed on
I'd
information.
love to get Martha Stewart's opinion on.
Yeah, I
the
love
insider
Martha's
trading.
opinion too. She's a good person. But it is corrupt. It's a corrupt situation, and the fact that there's unlimited giving by giant corporations sways everything. It has to stop. The Supreme Court ruled that corporations are people, and they can give as much as they want. Well, guess what? It just doesn't work.
The
Well, I'm
Supreme
gonna-
Court has a
yeah.
political program, and to say that they're going to be above politics, no, they have a philosophy of life which they express in politics, and they're allowed to do that, but they're not supposed to be able to do that to control us, and that's what they're doing. Look at the Supreme Court. It's Harvard, it's Yale, it's Columbia. Doesn't anybody have any brains out of Chicago or Alabama or Nevada? I think they're just as smart. They're also old, right? And then they have to have one Jewish person and one black person to make it look as if, is there one Jewish person now?
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Well, Ruth Bader Ginsburg,
Oh,
who
yeah.
was accused also post-mortem of doing the same things
Same
Clarence
thing.
Thomas did.
Right. And then, right, the Supreme Court is, again, out of the 9 of them, I believe 6 are Catholic. Right. Now, so they do not represent the United States as far as education, income, religion, background.
Well, they're not elected by the people.
Yeah, and they've been appointed
To Henry's point, that's
by
what makes them
by a
independent.
Republican system,
Yeah.
right, which intended to do exactly what this is.
Are you
they're
saying,
doing.
when you say Republican system, you're talking about the Republican Party?
Talking about the Republican Party and Leonard Leo and the Koch brothers, they knew what they were doing. They wanted to change the ethos in the United States, and they figured it out. So they succeeded very well. And if you look who voted Trump in his first term, it was a lot of Wall Street money, right? So and he is not a Democrat. He's a demagogue, right? He's very interested in his own image and in power. And I think what happened was he realized as president of the United States, he is now the most powerful person in the world. He didn't know what he was doing, but people knew how to manipulate him. And he changed the tax structure here. He's changed the justice structure here. He didn't have a plan, but people figured out that they could appeal to his ego, and he had no idea what to do, so they gave him things to do. And he succeeded, and they succeeded. And that's part of the reason. And if you look at, say, the parallel with Hitler, right? He was supported by the Krupps and Thyssen and all the others who thought, yeah, this guy's a jerk. We hate him. We don't want to have dinner with him, but he's good for taxes and business and German power. And look what happened. So there is a strict parallel. And if you look at lesser dictators, it's the same thing. Look at Putin. He got supported by oligarchs, and now the oligarchs are afraid of him. And so there's a progression in this, and power corrupts. And once you get used to it, it really, I've had power in a small way. I've run this, I've run that, and really it's kind of nice, right? But you realize that people who have power can do awful things, right? And they're often supported by people who want to do more awful things. Right, look at the education system in the United States. We have a debt society. Now, people are paying debt on credit cards, on houses, on cars, right? The people say, don't look at what anybody says, look at what the bond market says. That's what they say. That's really, and it's entirely because of debt. And how did we get into debt? Well, maybe financial institutions said, hey, we can sell debt products, right? So mortgages, everybody has a mortgage. Everybody has a car. So what is it? 80% of cars are bought on loan. People who are going to college are dying with debt. I went to Ivy League places. It cost $1,500 to go to an Ivy League school in 1960. By inflation, that would be about $13,000 to $15,000 a year now. Right? My parents were middle class. They could afford paid cash. And they didn't pay cash because there were scholarships all over the place. But they could afford to send a kid to an Ivy League school and say, okay, we won't eat out once a week. Or maybe it doesn't matter. But a middle class, now Columbia is, I believe, $86,000 a year. And that doesn't include room and board. Right? And if you look at who's going there, 30 or 50% are from the top 1% of this country, right? So and they get legacies, and our elite are an illusion because they're triumphs of education. They're not all that smart. Being rich doesn't mean you're smart. What it means is you've had great advantages. And I was speaking to somebody and said, I didn't start off, with this. My mother was a teacher, my father was. And he said, you don't understand. Compared to me, you were born in privilege. And he was right. So what should be taken over by this government? Healthcare, education, housing should be applied to everybody, right? Justice should be equal for everybody. I spent 1 month as a doctor substituting in a jail here, and everybody should see what's in American jails. We have 3 million people in jail, and I believe 20% of Americans have criminal records, and in black people, 1/3 or 1/4 have been in jail. Right? There's something wrong here, right?
Well,
And calling it a correction system.
if you do the crime, you got to do the time. far as I'm concerned, all right? And going back to the Supreme Court, I mean, I think you have to have smart people on the Supreme Court, okay? And, you know, would you want me on the Supreme Court?
Yes.
I don't think so. I don't think I'm qualified.
You might be more level-headed than.
No, but it's, I mean,
Dogmatic
you're
individual.
interpreting the law. You know, you have to be schooled in that.
Well, one assumes.
It's
that you-
sort of like-
But wait a minute, back up.
Go on.
I would want you on there had you studied law. But you know, Philip's point was that why aren't there judges from different parts of the country just representing the people in those regions with a different thought or an overview that's different than being packed with Harvard and Yale and Columbia? That was his point. So yes, even if you went to Brooklyn Polytech and get a law degree, which is nothing wrong with Brooklyn Polytech, but rather than Harvard, Yale, or
They don't have a law
Columbia,
school.
you'd be fine. You know, you're probably a better judge.
I don't go along with that. I think you need smart people, and, you know, I think that these people who are, the people on the court today are well vetted, know how to read it, know how to interpret it. Constitutional law is not just criminal law. And I think
You are guilty of credentialism. You believe
So shoot me
somebody
now.
has credentials.
So shoot me now.
No,
You
you're
know?
not going to shoot you, but you
All right.
think that somebody has a certain brand is therefore superior.
No, I didn't say that. I said that all right, what I would say is that the people who are there right now are probably the best qualified, just because they're not unqualified because they went to Columbia or Yale or Harvard or whatever, especially in the law schools. I think those law schools are really very good. And,
Some of the best lawyers in the country
And-
didn't go to those
well,
schools.
anyway, and I think that, in my mind, I think that, you know, it's good to have people like that running around and trying to interpret the Constitution. I mean, Roe versus Wade was politicized, but that was wrong. But they recently decided, the Supreme Court recently decided to move away from some of their previous rulings regarding property rights when they decided not to take on an appeal of some state courts regarding rent control and rent stabilization laws here in New York. Okay, and now if they were just in the pocket of realtors and big buck people, they wouldn't have turned that appeal away.
Well, you don't know
So-
whether they're really thinking, look, we want to push a conservative agenda. We can't push everything. Let's pick these few points and let's give the liberals a little something now and then so they can't say we're 100% conservative.
Well,
But they are. If you look at what they say and where they speak, they are extremely conservative. They're out of touch, and they're pushing an agenda that 20-30% of the United States follows mistakenly,
Let's see what happens with consumer protection.
right?
You do know that Obamacare went through, presumably, as far as I know, because Roberts himself changed the thing to a tax.
Mhm.
But you can't make somebody buy something in this country.
Right.
He's the one that
Well,
himself called it a tax.
Obamacare, given the fact that we have one of the world's worst healthcare systems, right? And that's true. People think we have a great healthcare system. And we do have lots of innovation and lots of research and lots of wonder drugs. But let's put it this way. The middle class in Sweden lives longer than the upper class in the United States. Right? That's just the way it is.
that's because they drink Schlivovitz.
I'm sorry?
That's because they drink Schlivovitz.
They probably drink whatever they want. And fine. But we have a horrible healthcare system. If you're poor in the United States, your life expectancy is 16 years less than if you're in the
I understand, but that's not my point.
Well,
What I'm trying to say is Roberts is the one
point
who made that law.
I'm making a point that Obamacare was a patch on a horrible system.
Right.
And they should have changed the system.
Right.
And actually Biden is starting a little bit. Now Medicare can negotiate drug prices. What do you know?
But this drug companies are doing a legal appeal to that law,
Right.
whether it's
I know, of
constitutional or
course.
not.
Right.
So,
Well, Phil, don't you think if Henry was on the Supreme Court, you and I would try and corrupt him somehow?
You know, What could I do? I could take you to my house and have a hamburger and some salad. Yeah.
You could support his political campaigns.
So I hope to have the Pontificators back for a part 4 between now and next November. But I'll get your early
Wait a minute, next or this November?
November of 2024.
Oh, I hope you have us back.
I hope we're a country then, but if we are, and I still have a podcast, I'd love to have you back sometime between now and then. But I want to get the 3 years early choices for who you would like to be the victor on election day of
Why
2020.
wait?
Yeah.
Unless the Republicans come up with a good candidate. Why wait?
Well, I'd like to know who you would
I'm
prefer.
perfectly happy with Biden. I think he's a great caretaker. I think he's done a good job.
To
Not
Phil's,
finished.
I'm sorry, but to Phil's point,
Right.
he's going to be 80 some odd years old.
So what? I'm sitting here,
And you got Kamala Harris sitting right behind him.
right? And
Great
and
insurance
you've
policy.
got Phil sitting here, and you've got Henry sitting here.
No, but that's not my point. My point is he has shown signs of,
I don't know that that's quantifiable.
well, I can see with my own eyes.
I don't know that. The man has, first of all, he's dyslexic. Number 2 is, it's difficult when you're dyslexic to line up words, and then you have to research in your memory. I mean, I've had to do that since I was a child.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is.
But we are still a free country, and you are free to support him. What about you, Phil?
I support him. I think he's doing a wonderful job. The Democrats seem either,
Of course, he'd be retired now if he had term limits when he was a senator.
which is fine. We'd have had some
Now,
younger.
let me say
I'm
that
in
as an
favor of younger
independent voter. I'm saying this as an independent
Yeah.
voter.
No, that's fine. I'm just curious.
Former Republican donor, former Democrat donor. I'm an independent. So I go for what I think is the best guy.
Phil, you support him as well.
I support him. He's been inarticulate all his life and dyslexic or whatever you want to call it. So he's no worse now.
You don't think it's dementia, you think it's dyslexia.
No, I think he's been inarticulate forever. Just like I had dinner at the White House
Medical professional here.
to meet Reagan, right? Never mind how. And the idea was, is he demented or not? So you can't do a mental status on a president, but you can steer conversation. The man was demented, right?
But Biden is not.
Well, I haven't had dinner with Biden.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Henry,
I
get Joe on the phone.
think that Biden has done a horrendous job with the immigration situation. And I cannot imagine how he can let, it was interesting. Adams and Hochul, were screaming at him. We need help. We need help. This can't continue. Right? And all of a sudden, this is where you realize that money talks. All of a sudden, the governor of Chicago, or the governor of Illinois says, hey, this can't go on. Who's the governor? What's the last name of the governor of Illinois? Pritzker.
Oh,
Yeah.
Pritzker, okay.
Pritzker, a very wealthy family, very politically connected, and big time donors. So when you have somebody with the buck saying, you can't do this to my state and my cities, and then all of a sudden he wakes up and says, oh, okay, we'll build 20 miles of wall.
We'll build that wall.
Which won't make any difference.
Which won't make any difference. It's
But
absurd.
it just shows you where his head is at.
Well,
And he would have if Pritzker didn't really call him on it, he would have continued with whatever the path he was going down forever.
I can't call
And New York City is being dead. Are they going to foot that bill for taking care of, all those hundreds of thousands of people are coming up? Who pays for that?
You and me, Henry.
I mean, that's
Unless we move
bullcrap.
to Jersey.
And so therefore, he's not doing his job.
Yeah.
He's not doing
That's
his
one
job.
segment of his
That's a big
responsibility.
segment of it.
It's one smaller
What you're
segment in the
seeing
global
is
picture.
just to start the movement of populations. Wait till climate.
I don't care
goes-
about. I don't
gets
care
worse.
about this. I don't care about that.
We'll discuss
What
climate
I'm
in
caring
the next
about
meeting.
is what's happened now, all right, and what's
Right.
gone on for the last couple of months, without local populations, local governments having any recourse, and that's what I care. That's what I care about.
Well, I'll wrap it up by asking you one more question, and you don't have to reveal your political affiliations, although Barry already revealed his, but do you guys have any opinion at all on RFK Jr. and his campaign? We'll start with you, Barry.
I think fracturing the vote is a terrible mistake at a time of non-cohesiveness to begin with, and this just adds fuel.
Do you think it takes more away from the Democrats than the
I think it
Republicans?
takes away from the Democrats,
Because he does appeal to a lot of libertarians and
which
Republicans.
is unfortunate.
But I mean,
He was very good in Riverkeeper, and he should stay there.
well, what about his issues? You can't get behind
I
any of
am
them?
not a conspiracy theorist, which seems to be a major platform for him.
Okay.
And if there were all these conspiracies, well, a lot of them must have worked fairly well because we got along for the last several hundred years like that. Well, maybe 250 here, but I don't buy his pitch.
Okay.
I'm not saying he's ill-intended, but I don't buy his pitch. I'm not convinced. And having met his father and having met some of the other members of the family, he, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't measure up to them.
He's the last gasp of the Kennedys. Right. It's hard to understand why he does this, but he has bizarre beliefs and he appeals to some people.
Which beliefs do you think he has that are bizarre?
Vaccine,
Okay.
for one.
Mhm.
Right. That's
The big ones? The big one for you? Henry?
I think it's too bad that his father died, because otherwise he could have taken him out behind the woodshed and knocked some sense into him.
All right. So you're all joining the RFK campaign. I can see that already.
And his own family's against him. And
Yes.
has come out against him, which must tell you something. I would think they know
Well,
a
some
little
of his
more.
family has, yeah, but
A lot of them.
I do appreciate you people coming by today, and I was tongue in cheek. I do hope we have several more between now and next November.
I hope so.
Pontificator. By then it'll be like Pontificators, episode 6 or 7.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have a happier subject matter on the table next time.
Yeah, some good news for a change.
That would be great. There's plenty of good news. It's getting buried by the crap news at the
Well,
moment.
maybe next episode we'll talk about only good news, and no one will want to watch it.
That's right.
Depends.
All right, gentlemen, thank you again for coming by. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Henry. A lot of fun.
And for those that are watching us on YouTube, you don't need to see my mug. You see it all the other times.
There we go.